The greatest secrets are almost never taken by force. They are given away willingly. This is one of the most overlooked truths about human nature. Most people believe that if they want answers, they need to ask better questions, push harder, or pressure someone into speaking. But the human mind doesn't respond well to force. The moment people sense that someone is trying to extract information from them, an invisible wall begins to rise. It happens almost instantly. They become more careful with their words. Their thoughts become guarded. They start filtering every sentence before it leaves their mouth. Even honest people become selective when they feel observed or evaluated. The conversation changes, not because they have something to hide, but because their instinct tells them to protect their sense of control. This reveals a fascinating paradox of psychology. The harder you chase information, the faster it slips away. But the moment people stop feeling hunted, they naturally begin lowering their defenses. They speak more freely because they no longer feel the need to protect themselves. Human beings have a deep desire to be understood. They want to share their experiences, explain their opinions, and tell their stories. Yet this only happens when they feel emotionally safe, not when they feel questioned, judged, or analyzed. Real influence begins with patience, not pressure. The most revealing conversations rarely come from clever interrogation. They emerge from an atmosphere where people forget they are being observed at all. When someone feels respected, relaxed, and in control of the conversation, they often reveal far more than they ever intended. That is where the true power of communication begins, not in forcing words out of people, but in creating the conditions where honesty appears naturally. Every person carries within them an invisible desire that shapes nearly every conversation they have. It is not the desire to impress others, or even to be agreed with. It is the desire to be seen, understood, and heard. This quiet need exists beneath confidence and insecurity alike. It explains why some conversations feel unforgettable, while others are forgotten within minutes. Most people assume influence comes from saying the right words. In reality, influence often begins by creating the space where someone else wants to speak. Human beings naturally enjoy talking about their experiences, beliefs, memories, and ambitions, because these things form the foundation of their identity. When they describe themselves, they are not simply sharing information, they are revealing how they see the world. But this only happens when emotional safety is present. The human mind constantly scans every interaction for signs of judgment, criticism, or hidden agendas. The moment someone senses they are being evaluated or manipulated, their psychological defenses quietly activate. Their words become measured, their emotions become restrained, and the conversation loses its authenticity. The opposite is equally powerful. When people feel accepted instead of examined, something remarkable happens. Their guard begins to disappear. They stop calculating every sentence and begin speaking with honesty. Trust grows naturally because they no longer feel the need to protect themselves. One of the most underestimated tools in any conversation is silence. Most people rush to fill every pause because silence makes them uncomfortable. Yet silence has its own language. A calm, patient pause communicates confidence, attention, and genuine interest. It invites the other person to continue, often encouraging them to reveal thoughts they had no intention of sharing. The invisible door to every human mind is never unlocked by pressure. It opens when people feel safe enough to lower their defenses and curious enough to keep talking. Those who understand this principle rarely need to force a conversation. They simply create the conditions where the truth chooses to emerge on its own. There is a form of influence so subtle that most people never notice it happening. It does not rely on persuasive speeches, clever arguments, or charismatic performances. Instead, it begins with a skill that is often mistaken for passivity, the ability to truly listen. Most conversations are not genuine exchanges. They are competitions disguised as dialogue. While one person speaks, the other is already preparing a response, waiting for the opportunity to prove a point or redirect the conversation back to themselves. Very few people are actually listening. They are simply waiting for their turn to talk. This is why genuine attention has become so powerful. When someone realizes they are being heard without interruption or judgment, they experience something increasingly rare. They feel understood. That feeling creates an emotional connection stronger than almost any carefully chosen words. But listening alone is not enough. The deeper skill lies in emotional mirroring, not copying someone's gestures or pretending to agree with everything they say, but reflecting their emotional state with sincerity. If someone shares excitement, acknowledge that excitement. If they express frustration, recognize the emotion before offering any opinion. People naturally trust those who make them feel emotionally recognized, because it tells the mind, this person understands my experience. Trust is rarely built through dramatic moments. It grows through small, consistent signals that communicate respect, patience, and attention. A thoughtful pause before responding, a question that encourages deeper reflection instead of changing the subject, the willingness to let another person finish their thoughts without interruption. These quiet actions create an atmosphere where defenses gradually disappear. Ironically, those who speak the least often learn the most. They are not chasing information or trying to impress anyone. They are creating a conversation where others willingly reveal their thoughts, emotions, and motivations. In the end, people rarely remember the person who spoke the most. They remember the one who made them feel understood. Because feeling understood is one of the rarest experiences in human interaction. Curiosity is one of the most underestimated forms of influence. Most people believe that getting answers depends on asking direct questions. But direct questions often create direct resistance. The moment someone feels they are being investigated, their mind begins filtering information. They choose their words carefully, hide uncertainty, and reveal only what feels safe. What could have been an honest conversation slowly becomes a guarded performance. This is the difference between interrogation and genuine curiosity. Interrogation seeks control. It has an agenda, a destination, and an expectation. Genuine curiosity, on the other hand, seeks understanding. It allows conversations to unfold naturally without forcing a specific outcome. People can sense this difference almost immediately, even if it is never spoken aloud. Indirect questions are often far more powerful than direct ones because they remove pressure. Instead of asking someone to defend themselves or explain their actions, they invite reflection. Rather than demanding facts, they encourage stories. And stories reveal far more than simple answers ever could. While telling a story, people naturally expose their priorities, emotions, beliefs, fears, and values, often without realizing it. This happens because the human mind enjoys explaining experiences more than answering challenges. A story feels like self-expression, while an interrogation feels like self-protection. One encourages openness, the other activates caution. The deepest conversations are built on voluntary disclosure. People are far more comfortable sharing information they believe they have chosen to reveal than information they feel has been extracted from them. That sense of choice creates trust and lowers emotional defenses. The greatest communicators understand this principle well. They never rush to the next question or force the conversation in a particular direction. They allow curiosity to guide the interaction with patience and genuine interest. Ironically, when people no longer feel that someone is trying to obtain information from them, they often reveal more than anyone expected. The most valuable truths are rarely demanded, they are invited. In a world where everyone believes that influence belongs to the loudest voice, silence has become one of the rarest forms of power. Most people fear silence because it creates uncertainty. They rush to fill every pause with explanations, opinions, or unnecessary words, believing that constant speaking keeps them in control. In reality, the opposite is often true. Silence creates psychological tension. The human mind naturally seeks closure whenever it encounters an unfinished moment. When a conversation suddenly becomes quiet, most people experience an almost irresistible urge to break that silence. They begin adding details they had not planned to share. They clarify statements that needed no clarification. They continue talking simply because the empty space feels uncomfortable. This is why patient communicators understand that silence is not the absence of communication. It is communication itself. A calm pause signals confidence. It tells the other person that you are not desperate for an answer or anxious to control the direction of the conversation. That quiet confidence encourages the other person to relax, reflect, and often continue speaking on their own. Patience has a hidden influence that force can never achieve. People are accustomed to being interrupted, corrected, or rushed. When someone allows them to think without pressure, they feel respected. That feeling slowly lowers emotional defenses and transforms an ordinary conversation into an honest one. Many of the most meaningful revelations do not happen immediately after a question is asked. They appear several seconds later, after the other person has had time to think. Those extra moments often separate a rehearsed response from a genuine one. The silence gives the mind permission to move beyond habit and into honesty. True influence does not come from speaking at the perfect moment. It comes from knowing when not to speak. Those who master strategic silence understand that every unnecessary word can interrupt a valuable thought. Sometimes the most powerful statement in any conversation is the one that is never spoken. Every meaningful conversation follows a hidden rhythm. At first, people reveal only what feels comfortable. They offer safe opinions, familiar stories, and carefully chosen details. This is the surface level of communication, the version of themselves they present to almost everyone. But if the conversation continues without pressure, something subtle begins to change. Psychologists often describe this as emotional momentum. Once a person shares one genuine thought and is met with understanding instead of judgment, the mind begins to relax. Each honest admission makes the next one feel slightly easier. The emotional cost of being open gradually decreases, and trust quietly begins to replace caution. Think of it like rolling a small snowball down a hill. At the beginning, it is small and moves slowly, but with every turn it gathers more snow, becoming larger and harder to stop. Conversations often work the same way. A simple memory leads to a personal opinion. That opinion leads to an emotional experience. Before long, the discussion reaches places neither person expected at the beginning. What makes this process so powerful is that it feels voluntary. People are not revealing more because they have been pressured. They are revealing more because each moment of understanding reinforces the feeling that they are safe to continue. The conversation becomes less about answering questions and more about expressing themselves freely. This is why trust cannot be rushed. It grows through consistency, patience, and emotional safety. Every respectful response strengthens the invisible bridge between two people, making deeper honesty feel natural instead of risky. Those who understand human nature know that the deepest truths are rarely uncovered in a single dramatic moment. They emerge gradually, one honest sentence at a time. In the end, people often reveal more than they ever intended, not because someone outsmarted them, but because they forgot they needed to guard themselves. When trust gains momentum, openness follows naturally, and the conversation reveals far more than questions alone ever could. By now, one truth should have become clear. The greatest communicators are not the ones who dominate conversations. They are the ones who understand them. They recognize that every person carries invisible fears, hopes, and desires that shape every word they speak. Instead of trying to overpower those emotions, they learn to respect them. Many people mistake influence for control. They believe power comes from directing every conversation, predicting every response, or convincing others to think exactly as they do. But control is fragile. The harder you try to control another person, the more resistance you create. Human beings naturally protect their freedom of choice. The moment they feel manipulated, trust begins to disappear. Real influence works differently. It never demands. It invites. It never forces. it understands. When people feel respected, listened to, and emotionally safe, they naturally become more open. Not because they have been persuaded, but because they no longer feel the need to defend themselves. This is where emotional intelligence becomes a quiet form of strength. It is the ability to notice what is left unsaid, to recognize emotions before reacting, and to respond with patience instead of impulse. The strongest person in any conversation is often the one who remains calm, listens carefully, and allows others the space to express themselves without fear. In the end, every conversation reveals something far greater than information. It reveals human nature itself. Every pause, every story, every emotion is a reminder that people do not simply want to be heard, they want to feel understood. And when that need is met, honesty becomes effortless. So the final lesson is simple. Do not seek to control people, seek to understand them. Because understanding creates trust, trust creates openness, and openness creates conversations that no amount of pressure could ever achieve. The most powerful voice in any room is not always the one speaking the loudest. It is the one that makes others feel safe enough to speak honestly. And that is a form of influence that never depends on force, only on wisdom, patience, and a deep understanding of what it truly means to be human.